Herzlich willkommen zu Vorgestellt. Schön, dass ihr so viele von euch hier seid, eigentlich wie jedes Jahr. Ich begrüße euch zu der 12. Ausgabe unserer Reihe Vorgestellt, Basler Architektinnen und Architekten. Diese Reihe wurde in 2014 von BSA und SAM, BSA, das Bund Schweizer Architektinnen und Architekten, und SAM natürlich das Schweizerische Architektur, lanciert. Ziel war hier, eine Veranstaltung zu schaffen, um jungen Büros aus Basel eine Plattform zu geben, ihre Arbeit zu zeigen und ihre Haltung uns mitzuteilen. Ich habe das Gefühl, dass ich Echo habe. Ist es okay? Ist es okay für euch? Ja. Genau. Und deswegen sind wir auch heute sehr gespannt drauf, was wir alles hören werden. Wir haben 3 super Teams, auch wie immer. Bevor ich dazu komme, nur kurz, ich heiße Shadi Rahbaran, ich vertrete BSA Basel und Andreas Ruby, der auch danach zu uns kommt bei der Moderation. Natürlich ist er Direktor von SAM und vertritt das Museum. Heute Abend, wie ich schon erwähnt habe, haben wir 3 interessante Teams. Nur einfach zur Info, dass Andreas und ich immer zu diesen Büros und Ateliers von unseren Gästen heute gehen, mit ihnen eine Diskussion haben, interessante Gespräche und hoffen immer, dass da auch so eine schöne Narrative entsteht. Und da sind wir eben noch mehr gespannt darauf, was ihr heute uns erzählt. Der Ablauf ist so, dass jedes Büro einen kurzen Vortrag, 15 bis 20 Minuten hat und präsentiert. Ich habe sehr viele Slides gesehen, aber ich bin mir sicher, dass ihr das total genau, so, Pedro. So, dann wird es danach eine Diskussion geben. Ich werde nur bei jedem Team ganz kurz was über sie sagen und dann geht es los. Heute spricht das erste Team, ist Parabase. Danach präsentiert Guerra Klaus Architektinnen und abschließend das Büro Stadler, Zlokapa. Und ich werde jetzt dann einfach sofort mit dem ersten Team anfangen und ich habe versucht, eine kurze Resümee zu machen von Parabase, die schon so viel gemacht haben und so ganz tolle Projekte auch haben. Carla Ferrando und Pablo Garrido haben ihr Studio in Basel in 2021 gegründet. Sie haben lange in Basel bei sehr tollen Büros auch gearbeitet, wie bei Mila Maranta, Dina und Dina, Foster, das ist halt nicht in Basel, und HDM, Herzog und Dumoulin. Und da haben sie auch ihre Erfahrung. Zu ihren Projekten gehören ein Pavillon in Barcelona, 3 Gebäude in einem Stadtpark in Mexiko, die sehr interessant sind. Aber kürzlich, wie wir das alle mitbekommen haben, haben sie mit 2 Wettbewerbserfolge in Basel Schlagzeilen gemacht. Das erste Projekt ist in 2023 haben sie das gewonnen und es ist ein offener Wettbewerb gewesen für die Entwicklung des Areals Walkewerk Nord, die eine Wohnungsüberbauung mit Bauteil-Wiederverwendungen. Das Projekt heißt auch Reuse. Und erst kürzlich habt ihr auch einen weiteren Wettbewerb in Basel gewonnen, ein Projekt oder ein Wohngebäude für die SBB auf dem Transformationsgebiet Wolf. Und dieses Projekt heißt, es beschäftigt sich auch mit Reuse und mit Design for Assembly. Seit diesem Herbst 2025 unterrichtet ihr auch als Gaststudio an der ETH bei Entwurf und Architektur. Und euer Studio heißt Exforma. Ach so. Ihr habt jetzt die Bühne.
Hallo? Das geht auch. Hallo, zuerst vielen Dank für die Einladung. Es freut uns sehr, hier zu sein und auch mit unseren Freunden, die anderen Teams. Ich werde das auf Englisch machen. Here we are, Pablo and me here in the stage, but all what we will show, and we are talking in the name of the whole team. So Valentin, Meryl, and Thomas that are also here, or Victor and Mari. We have named our lecture on original architecture after a book by Marjorie Perloff. We hope it sums up well the intentions of our practice. In our practice, we are interested in the commonplace in the everyday. Everyday architecture can be seen as the direct result of the conjunction between human needs and economic factors. We are interested in the prevalence of its construction over its composition, in understanding its architecture as the physical result of a daily temporary utopia. These peripheral architectures are usually free from the mediation of architects, and sometimes even free from the control of the legislative power, a condition of contemporaneity that we try to explore and survey with our students. As we learned during our research on quaderns, when directed by Josep Lluís Mateo in the late 80s, the magazine also digged in the notion of the everyday and the periphery in a productive way. Not only physically, but also metaphorically, like in this photograph by Walker Evans, an emblematic one that appeared published in the magazine. We also saw this terrain back as a fertile ground, a terrain where time is suspended, a place where we can find abandonment or processes in formation, constructions still unfinished, almost like inverse ruins. With the concept of the new narrative, Mateo borrowed a term from postmodernism and gave it a new meaning. His declared interest was in the vulgarity of everyday life and the dirt of the real. Together with the periphery, he thus defined the place where new realities brewed and filtered by artificial discourses. Along with Mateo, architects like Marcel Meili, Hans Kohlhoff, Roger Diener, Jacques Herzog, or Pierre de Meuron tried to articulate a discourse through quaderns in order to escape from the reigning postmodernism, focusing their attention on the periphery, the banal, the commonplace, the prosaic everyday. In this document, which was part of the exhibition, you can see a series of photographs from the Zurich periphery by a young Marcel Meili. These photographs were later used as inspiration and model shot backgrounds in his project of the Stuart Recycling Center, a dear example of early reuse in 1989. Other architects, even younger, readers of that magazine, between them Christoph Gantenbein, Emmanuel Chris, Jan de Wilder, Philippe Ursprung, Sergi Sombates, Caruso Sanjon, were influenced by those articles. In turn, if history is like a pendulum, by tracing these hidden affinities, we also understood that architecture can simply emerge from a subjective observation of the world around us. Surveying the everyday is not a stylistic research, but rather a way to challenge established relationships of knowledge by admiring the beauty of everyday buildings and popular intelligence. Learning from the everyday can be also seen as a shared tradition in architectural modernity, if not as the very condition of architecture, one that gives shape and meaning to our environment. Just as Boris Groys points out when stating that a contemporary work is relevant and therefore worthy of surviving, when it brings into contact the world of high culture and that of low or popular culture. In the everyday, circularity is just a natural, pragmatic choice. Nevertheless, it ultimately reveals that buildings are the material evidence of a social and economic history and cannot be understood as autonomous forms. What we call waste shows exactly how contemporary industrial production processes work. As architects, we can question the notion of waste or the systems of assigning value in our society by reusing materials as components. These components, once alienated, have value beyond the purpose for which they were originally created. We believe that creation is an exercise of appropriation of the residues left behind by others. We help ourselves with the notions of ready-made and objet trouvé, not only as a creative tool, but also as a political one that question modes of production, establish economic logics, and power relationships in our societies. Nowadays, it is nearly impossible to identify the real cost of things. No correlation can be made between material and capital flows, such as a misalliance becomes even more pronounced when trying to measure not only waste, but also the value of carbon or the value of repair. It is along these trajectories that we see the use of spolia as a potential strategy to retool the market and our societies. In the Binaria project in Basel that we are currently developing, we started the design from the decision of reusing metal railways and metal sleepers as the load-bearing structure of the new housing building. Starting from the structural module, we later extrapolated the fragment to the whole volume given by the master plan of Chris Gantenbein. Post-stress concrete cores placed on the north facade act as bracing elements. In plan, the circulation cores are alternated with bathrooms and kitchens. Walls slide along the axis of the railways to generate different layouts, creating diagonal views from north to south and double circulations. The floor plan explores the idea of living in a deep floor plan, introducing density as a sustainability asset. The reused metal railways are always connected in pairs in order to perform structurally. From the outside, the project has two very distinct facades. The north one has a closed character, protecting the apartments from the noise of the highway and the potential chemical explosions. On the contrary, the south facade opens up to the protected communal courtyard. The same inclined acoustic panels act here as planting pods. By reusing multiple elements from the site, the project aims to maintain the historical, cultural, and the material value of the Wolf areal in Basel, while giving an answer to the future development of the place. The building envelope is kept as compact as possible, avoiding any kind of thermal bridges. The balconies, also made with reused metal sleepers, are hanged from a system of reused railways placed on the roof. Understanding CO2 as a currency in its own right might finally force us to not only align monetary and carbon values, but most importantly, to defossilize construction. This way, architecture can offer an alternative to the usual order of things, bypassing the logic of capitalist axioms. We believe that by challenging these axioms, we are also able to question not only conventions, norms, and established models, but also other notions embedded in architecture, like beauty. As Paul B. Preciado puts it, beauty is disgusting. Capitalism is the aestheticization of evil. That is why what we call ugly is beautiful and what we consider beautiful is ugly. Beauty is the aestheticization of domination, a form of the political closure of our perceptual and cognitive system. Beauty is the continuation of war by other means. Only the encounter with our true organic and therefore mortal nature, forever imperfect, vulnerable, and progressively marred, can paradoxically save us from the aesthetics of global capitalism. For us, starting to design from materials and components, it is also a way of destroying the idealized image of buildings. Both in our practice, but also at university, we like to start designing from construction techniques, details, structural principles, or fragments. The choice of the construction materials is often the founding principle of this process. We select components that have been bought, handled, used, abused, and discarded.
The chosen industrial objects that have been produced, processed, and discarded referred many times to the excesses of the capitalist mode of production. Transforming and assembling these existing components, we aim to challenge conventions in construction. Many times, we start our project by elaborating a catalog that sets up the boundaries within which to operate. If Ezra Pound described literature as language charged with meaning to the utmost possible degree, we like to think about architecture as construction charged with meaning to the utmost possible degree. Through the physics of construction and rigor, new architectural discourses could be unleashed. If postmodernism promoted an immaterial architecture based on authorship, other narrative could be constituted around the physical and the concrete. Social distances, megajoules per kilogram of embodied energy, thermal transmittances, carbon dioxide emitter per kilogram of construction, weight per square meter, particle concentrations, and volatile organic compounds helps us to turn the postmodern idea of authorship into a futile ambition. In our project for the recycling center in Uster, we decided to reuse the sheet pile as a structural component, mainly because of its availability, its resistance, its dry construction, its capability of dealing with water, and its ease of disassembly. The sheet pile is a component already embedded in a material circle. This way, if their lifespan is from around 100 years, we just added a small detour of 20 in order to fulfill the requirements of the future disassembly of the building. After these 20 years of use, the sheet pile could go back to its original purpose. In the perimeter of the plot, the sheet pile was used conventionally to contain the soil, allowing vehicles to move freely. In order not to modify any component, the elevator and the staircase were placed next to the building, envisioning in turn its potential to also be standard reuse components. In the recycling center, the sheet pile was reused by just turning it 90 degrees from its original position, walls as slabs, horizontal bracing as columns. The project also envisioned a system of shearing layers, reading the diverse lifespans of each individual component conforming the building. The foundations were thought as a prefabricated system, easily reversible and reused from a crane counterweight. The ground floor is therefore liberated for vehicles and objects, the main actors of this specific architecture. Humans, this time, are relegated to a secondary role. The structural principle is clear and direct, concentrating compression forces in the center while tension cables hold the overhangs of the sheet piles on the edges. This strategy also allowed to minimize the amount of foundations, a condition especially relevant given the temporary character of the building. The consideration of the future reusability of building components also requires a new perspective in the design process that goes beyond the current project. As architects, we are always part of a larger process that others have already contributed to and that others will still take forward. This simultaneous presence of disparate temporalities does not deny the linear course of time, but renders it more complex and elusive. It shows that the experience of time is determined not only by individual inclinations, but even more by cultural variables. We try to embrace heterotopia and heterochrony in our projects. Multiple times and multiple spaces converge in a building without clear lineage, without deep roots, and without nostalgia, as a positive vision of complexity and chaos. If according to the SEA, our life expectancy is higher than the one of the buildings that we design, why we can't understand them just as really slow events? Like in the example of the housing project in San Bernardino, where we repurpose abandoned ski lift posts. The reuse of elements entails the coexistence of different temporalities, in which historical distance and narrative are continually intertwined. This way, reuse, it is also an invitation to consider the past as an unstable phenomenon in constant change. Here, the dimension of time evades the sequence of the calendar. It is unstable and can be manipulated and bent by combining spolia, by reactivating ancestors, by comparing events across time, by fabricating memories. By aggregating segments of different temporalities and putting them in tension with each other. The act of reuse creates an interobjectual network which contains its components but does not coincide with any of them. It speaks not to the past but to the future. This is perhaps the most extreme case of a recurrent paradox of reuse. It damages existing buildings and yet, in some way, it ensures their preservation. We believe that errors guide evolution. Perfection offers no incentive for improvement. We believe that creativity consists in intuitively taking advantage of these errors for our own benefit, using what lies at the margin, the noise, the residue, the spolia. Important works have emerged through anomalies, if we understand anomalies as aberrant mutations within a discipline. That anomaly is the error we usually discard. It is there in the outskirts where we often find the DNA of the architecture that it interests us. In our practice, we are keen to explore the limits of all types of technologies to shift constantly from the physical to the digital world. There is a particularly interesting error-generating mechanism, appropriationism. If the insertion of the appropriated component is skillfully applied, it generates a short circuit and the symbolic, canonical, and even semantic order of the original pieces is disrupted. For a few moments, judgment of this new work is suspended, placed in a limbo, in a periphery where the mistake, the error, the lost in translation resonates with the anxiety of the influence. Appropriationism is something inherent to culture and to the evolution of knowledge. We are interested in an appropriation that becomes explicit and it's used as a gesture that openly reveals its own technique, as a method for creating works. As Kenneth Goldsmith puts it, context is the new content. Introducing the notions of ready-made as found, objet trouvé, copy, sample, appropriation, displacement, decontextualization, or bootlegging, we believe that we can make reuse not only resonates with ideas firmly rooted in the history of architecture, but maybe more interestingly, to other contemporary cultural practices. The same that we reject and discard, we adore seeing on the pedestal. As on Sundays, things feel different. Through these notions, components tend to open up in ways their functionality wouldn't otherwise allow, stretching, balancing, and piling one on top of the other, tilted on their side, hung up, or shoved over. We aim to explore their limits, unbalancing the fixicity of values. Components are exhausted on their past use only in terms of their primary functionality or the finite purpose intended for them by their capitalist maker. They are exhausted like an ironing board, a washing machine, a drawer, or a mattress. Their use value is deflated, but following this condition still leaves the potential for disobedient use of them, to challenge their deviant functionality. Misuse does not happen by invitation. It happens when there is a desire to release that potential, to discern an alternative route, to bend things to see what they are made of. It is a certain willingness to be perverse, to deviate from the straight path, the right path. This way, we can see the creative act as nothing more than taking material that already exists, appropriating it, and introducing a mutation. To create is to relate, something very simple and very difficult. We see architectural production inserting our own work into that of others, helping to abolish the traditional distinction between production and consumption, creation and copy, ready-made and original work. It is no longer about shaping a form from raw material, but about working with objects already circulating in the world, already informed by others. The notion of originality and even of creation slowly blurred within this new cultural landscape, shaped by the figures of the DJ, the programmer, or the curator. All tasks with selecting objects and embedding them in new specific contexts. In the current global context of climate emergency and the multi-organ failure of the capitalist system, this new paradigm presents a series of opportunities that architects can harness to contribute to a truly sustainable and circular cultural practice. It is no longer about the tabula rasa, but rather about finding a way to insert ourselves in the countless flows of capitalist production, even while calling them into question. Breaking with the modernist ideology, the question is no longer what new thing can be done, but rather what can be done with, or how can we produce singularity? How can we create meaning from that chaotic mass of objects, proper names, and references that constitute our everyday environment? The creation of architecture must move within a universe of pre-existing forms and objects, of already broadcast signals, of buildings already constructed, of paths already traced by our predecessors. This recycling of sounds, images, forms, or materials entails an incessant navigation through cultural history, a navigation that eventually becomes the very subject of the architectural practice. We don't think architecture is only about inscribing a personal work, subject to the reinscription of originality, but rather about reactivating the history of architecture over and over again, about using and repairing what has already been built. Because architecture can only be seen as a collective and anonymous work, of which, in the end, only what has been built in the name of all will remain. Thank you so much.
Kann ich ein bisschen Licht haben oder so? Dankeschön. Danke. Das nächste Team, nächste Büro sind Guerra und Klaus, Architekten und Architektinnen. Ich werde ganz kurz was zu sagen, weil ihr habt auch so viel gemacht, das werdet ihr dann selber ein bisschen erklären. Sofia Guerra ist in Lissabon geboren. Sie hat auch an der Lisbon School of Architecture studiert. Nach Berufserfahrungen in Deutschland und hat sie dann das Büro, also in Deutschland und sorry, es ist nur Deutschland, oder? Ja, genau, Entschuldigung. Hat das Büro Guerra Klaus mit Arthur Klaus gegründet. Sie ist auch bei vielen Büros auch bei vielen Kritiken auch immer dabei. Und du hast von 2015 bis 2021 bei Christian Gantenbein gearbeitet. Sorry? Ja, ich weiß, dazu komme ich gleich, das bist du noch. Und eben Arthur Klaus hat das genauso gemacht, ja, ihr habt euch auch da kennengelernt. Genau, Arthur hat auch da von 2016 bis 2021 gearbeitet. Du hast in Paris studiert, du kommst aus Paris und hast auch hast Praktiken und Exchanges gemacht bei Su Fujimoto und hast auch vorher bei Eric Lapierre und andere Büros gearbeitet. Ich gebe euch jetzt den Stage.
Wow. Ich fange einfach zu präsentieren nach Parabase. I will switch immediately in English to spare you a bad level of German. Thank you very much for being present tonight. Thank you very much also for the BSA, the SAM, Andreas and Shadi for supporting the presentation of young architects. It's important for us, but also for the next one. And yeah, thank you very much for that. We started our office in 2022, based on a multicultural background, but also based on the work of an intensive team that I will take the opportunity to thank tonight for developing those projects, past team and present team in our office. Here is a short sample of the project we are developing. We mainly get our projects through public order, public competition. Nevertheless, each of them is an option or a project in itself that we try to learn from and to explore architecture. Here is Basel Center Research for Child Health in the center of Basel. The Baustart was actually 2 weeks ago. In the middle is a school and a kindergarten in Wangen bei Olten that should be finished next year. And the last project here is the one that we started. It's a renovation of an administration building in the suburb of Luzern in Emmen that we are starting the fourth project.
So we are here using a diagram from Charles Jeanks, not to talk about postmodernism. I don't think that we want to classify ourselves as postmodernism. But we do think that this diagram can explain very well how much the time can influence the architecture, because our office, I don't believe that probably we would be doing exactly the same if we would be in another time. And we start to envision what are actually the factors that make our architecture be how it is. And for us, we do think that we have a certain pragmatic vision for the architecture, because of all the big urges, the difficulties that comes from the development of technology, or AIs, and who knows even more what's coming with quantum computing and so on. So that we really need ways of finding architecture in a very more simple way. We do think that our architecture can be resumed in 4 values. We classify them as then the situatedness, and we really care about the context, and we really try to preserve the history. Systematization, on really trying to figure out with the program a very clear way of dividing everything. The economy of means on the construction, we really do think that is very important together with the systematization. And then the exception, also because if you would be only doing systems, then we would be machines, right? So we are trying to bring then the human factor after the end with a certain exception.
The first chapter of value, as Sofia said, is situatedness. You have to see that what we present are not the project in itself, but part of project that express a little bit those value. In the first one of this renovation of the administration building of Emmen, we of course use the existing building of the Swiss architect Paul Steiger, and we try to preserve the characteristic of this architecture. It's actually an ensemble of 2 buildings, an auditorium building and this tower-like administration with this particular structure, like outside structures, and the metal panel bronze that you cannot see really here, and also this strange finition of the roof. The corner is a particular situation of this building and in the modern architecture in general, and we try to actually preserve this aspect or for its quality by reusing the panel and changing a little bit their color, but by adding this new layer and this new isolation, the corner became extremely present just by its construction. And therefore, we decided to remove the corner to have a light expression of the architecture. Another approach on the school of Olten is more linked to the Städtebau or to the urban concept, also from a Swiss architect, Hans Anger this time. And here the base or the substance was actually already quite nice of this campus that we propose to extend it in the same logic with the kindergarten separated also a little bit like this program separated from the rest. And this continue the grid or the existing grid of the project. Other elements amongst many that we try to reinterpret in this chapter, the north windows of the school towards the forest that now is almost built and almost finished. But also, for instance, the stairs, letting the light go through, so the existing stairs through, and helping the floor plan to have a bit more light. And that's also things we reinterpret or we reuse in the project. The terrazzo, the floor that became a bit lighter to mark the difference. Here in Basel, other approach, we are in the University Campus Spital, where this big building face the historic fabrics or pattern of the historic city. And the challenge was to react a little bit to this particular situation of the city with those single object versus the old fabric. Therefore, our volume proposed a differentiated site. On one side, we align and repeat the historic fabric. On the other, we twist or bend with a diagonal facade that echoes or dialogue with the single object of the campus or the University campus in Basel. Second chapter, different value, the systematization here, but same project, this corner building in Basel, where we place all the not the structure of the building, but the circulation, the steig zone, the sanitar, everything in one row, in one core, in order to free an open space. Quite simple concept for office, but that offer flexibility. But with a raster that can be transformed also in single office building, and with our ideal floor plan that could, in the future, be transformed into housing if necessary. Other buildings, this administration building in Romanshorn, also in Switzerland, where we reuse the typology of the atrium to propose a building where the most public part is in the center and the more private is in the periphery. And with this onion floor plan, we can solve the different type of access and privacy of this type of building and become a floor plan more concrete. For example, this school in Rapperswil, Jona, where the client needed several configuration of the space, and we offer a system that can be divided into clusters that can be recombined in big space, small space, alternatively, according to the need. Coming back to the school in Olten, here the system was kind of given in a way, or in a simple way, with always these stairs and those two rooms on the side. And this module repeated a second time, and in the ground floor, here, corridors that link all these spaces. And then we just simply extended this module that is already flexible and efficient today, and connected it in the ground floor, with the kindergarten offering a clear, simple space that can be transformed over the time.
So for a third value, economy of means. For us, this is not about austerity, but about clarity, using each material and each structure in a very relevant way. For example, not every time the wood, actually for us, we don't think that wood is the only way of the only material that can be used to reduce CO2. We rather think that structures can be further developed to try to avoid extra material and so on. So for us, the hybrid structures are very much looked into it, because then we can also promote things like modularity and prefabrication. But also, what is also very important for us, funny enough, is not like to give the circulation only to the people, but also that the structure itself can provide for the whole technical distribution. Another way that we think that structures can be looked even more into detail is, for example, here in this office proposal, where we give also a grid on the floor, where we give the possibility that certain areas of the floor could be removed so that you could add walls with certain high acoustic requirements. Or, for example, when we look at things like facade modularity, but at the same time we try to use this modularity technical approach on like the division of each module and so on, and make it as an ornament in the facade. So in a way that try to bring the technical point of view as an like architectural element. And here is another example where we thought about modularity to another level, a little bit of even like at a bigger level, where we had like a typology of a very long house, which is actually, it was a school, but a long house typology, let's say, that we could really then develop the whole building as modular. So we could really think of each time bringing the element of the full element of the room, and in order to take away this modularity expression that is very much present today, we put then a facade as the single element that represents, in this case for this project, it was one side is trying to mimic the existing school like facade, and the other one is then creating a cursive which is more kids friendly. Yeah, for us, just to say that modularity is something that we could already see with our projects, that it really reduced the span of the construction site, and we, for sure, will continue preserving it. Sometimes this modularity already exists in some of the projects that we work, and especially when it works pretty well, we try to keep it. So again, on this other project that Arthur already mentioned, where we hope that we can reuse the existing panels and only remove the current paint that it has. But then when the client has different needs, like photovoltaics, then we think of photovoltaics more as an add-on element, and then it becomes again one part of the ornament of the architecture of the building. And in this case, in this project, then we just add also a roof, which changes the facade expression without needing to change the architecture, the original architecture of the building. And then in this roof, besides giving like a terrace area for the people, it also provides for more photovoltaics. And then, like we said, like exception is also very important for us, so that nothing becomes too systematic. We do always at the end give a special attention to this exception. In this case, it was a school where it was elevated in a hors parterre, and we thought that perhaps the most important point of this system then it was this entrance situation, where actually we don't have the plan now, but where we break and suddenly the whole building opens up to the public, and we thought that these staircases then could also be used eventually as a classroom area, let's say outside, or where the students meet before going to the school. Or, for example, again on the long house typology, where we try to think of the garden as the element that breaks the rigidness of the repetitive facade, and then we try to visualize it. or when they gave us a chance of building a building in Basel, which could have an amazing view, of course. Then we put the break room on the last floor, and we tried to put all the expression in it with this round meeting room. Or when we were building the school, and we saw that the library is the most public element. We then thought of taking out of the rigidness that exists today of this orthogonal plan. We create a semicircle, the sun sticks out of the plan and overlooks to the existing forest, which is very beautiful. And this one, it was also very nice that the client or the teachers, after they come to you and they say, hey, I'm really happy with this room and I can't wait to be in it, and this is really a big reward. Or when we again propose a very flexible way of housing in a very, again, very rigid and pragmatic approach, but then we put all the attention into the cursives that goes and enclose the courtyard between the housing, and we try to provide a more human scale, maybe not human scale in this case, but and this one is a collaboration with actually one dear friend, Rafael Caddy. Or when you already have a project that it already has an amazing view, and then you think that, yeah, the only thing you could do is to add a roof. Yeah, thank you.
So, last but not least, Stadler, Zlokapa, Studio. Magdalena hat in München und RCA London studiert. Sie hat ihr Praktikum oder ein Praktikum bei Herzog und Dummerong in 2015 gemacht. Sie hat 2018 bis 2020 bei Buchner Bründler gearbeitet und du hast dann in 2020 mit Srdjan Büro gegründet. Du warst auch von 2021 bis 2023 wissenschaftliche Mitarbeiterin am Institut Architektur in Mutenz Basel an der FH NW. Srdjan hat in Triest und Mendrisio studiert. Du hast von 2014 bis 2021 bei Bühl & Zund gearbeitet. Du bist auch ein Member von AA Collectives und vielleicht erzählst du auch was dazu, wenn ihr eure Projekte zeigt. Und du warst auch bis 24 wissenschaftlicher Mitarbeiter bei TU Kaiserslautern. Und genau, und auch weiter in Karlsruhe bei Interpezin Architektur. Also, wo seid ihr? Kommt ihr nach vorne? Da seid ihr.
Okay. Nein. Vielen Dank an Shadi und Andreas, an dem Team vom BSA SAM für die Einladung. Die Präsentation von uns hat den Titel In Between. Wir zeigen euch heute 3 von unseren laufenden Projekten, 3 gewonnenen Wettbewerbe, alle Ensembles von kleinen Häusern. Bei allen geht es um ein Weiterbauen von bestehenden Strukturen. Was die Bauten zusammenhält, ist ein Raum inzwischen. Das Interesse für den Raum in between hat schon vor der Gründung von Srdjan Zlokapa gestartet. Unsere Karriere in der Selbstständigkeit hat als Teil von ein Kollektiv, AA Kollektiv, wie Shadi gesagt hat, angefangen. Mit anderen Architekten, die wir aus dem Studium oder aus Basel kannten. Zusammen haben wir den Wettbewerb für die Erneuerung des Zentralplatzes in Warschau zwischen dem neuen Museum für zeitgenössische Kunst und dem Palast der Kulturen gewonnen. Im Bild sieht das Palast der Kulturen, ein Kind der Sozialrealismus der 50er Jahre. So ein steinernen großen Haus. Das Projekt in erster Linie will kritisieren den monumentalen Maßstab von dem Palast und will auch ein bisschen die ganze städtebauliche Anlage in Frage stellen. Die Idee von dem Projekt, die Straßen und die Grundstücksaufteilungen aus der Vorkriegszeit durch den Bodenbelag wiederherzustellen, ist nicht nur eine formale Geste, sie ermöglicht es, den riesigen Raum in kleineren Zonen zu unterteilen. Wie Zygmunt Borawski, ein geschätzter Mitglied von unserem Kollektiv, gesagt hat, entstehen kleine Stadtwohnzimmer. Hier sieht man ein bisschen die Anlage, so wir wieder entdecken so die Ulica Slota mit dem Bodenbelag. Da sieht man diese kleinen Hofe, die Grenze von dem Ghetto von Warschau, und das Ganze wird dann von Grünen umgespült. Auch durch die neue Vegetation wirkt das Palast von dem Platz her nicht mehr wie eine monumentale Geste, sondern wie eine Kolonnade mit Eingänge und sogar ganz vielen schönen öffentlichen Nutzungen. Die bestehenden Steine von dem Platz werden wieder verwendet und mit neuen gemischt. Elemente von dem damaligen Platz, wie die Tribüne und die Lampen, werden wie Ruinen oder Folies im Garten erhalten. Hier sieht man die Ghettolinie, so einen alten Kandelaber, der einfach verschoben wird und
um den Raum dazwischen geht es auch hier bei einer Referenz, auf die wir immer wieder zurückgreifen, das Economist Ensemble von Alison und Peter Smithson in London. Das Programm teilen sie auf unterschiedliche Volumen auf, mit unterschiedlichen Maßstäben, mit dem reagieren sie wie auf den Kontext außenrum und einem öffentlichen Freiraum, der dazwischen entsteht. Was wir dabei ganz spannend finden, ist so ihre Forderung oder ihre Denkweise weg vom Gebäude nur als reines Objekt, sondern wie die ganze gebaute Situation in Betracht zu ziehen. Wie man hier im Bild sieht, wird der Raum zwischen den Häusern wie der Protagonist. Durch die Lücken zwischen der Bebauung wird die Stadt außen herum auch mit ins Projekt mit einbezogen. Es gibt verschiedene Zonen, es gibt diese Schwellen wie Portikos, Sockel und Treppen, die zwischen Stadt und Gebäuden vermitteln, zwischen innen und außen. Ganz elegant beziehen sie auch das bestehende Haus auf der Parzelle mit ein. Hier sieht man die Brandwand von einem alten Club durch einen Erker, so eine kleine Intervention an der Brandwand in der Sprache der neuen Bauten. Und so diese Themen wie Zwischenraum, Kontext, der Bezug zum Kontext, diese Übergangsräume, die vermitteln zwischen unterschiedlichen Bereichen im Projekt und auch bestehende, gefundene Elemente, die es vor Ort gibt, sind wie Themen, die bei uns immer wieder auftauchen.
Unser erstes gemeinsames Projekt ist die Erweiterung der Schulstiftung Larisek, direkt am Ufer des Bodensees. Das Programm wird auf unterschiedlichen Häuser wie bei den Smithsons aufgeteilt. Zwischen den Gebäuden öffnen sich tiefe Bezüge in die umgebende Landschaft am Seeufer. Das Schulhaus wird dabei als Campus verstanden. 3 neue Pavillonbauten ergänzen die bestehenden Gebäude der Sonderschule, die man hier sieht. Der Schulhof oder der Raum zwischen die Häuser übernimmt dann die Funktion einer Aula. Alle die Funktionen der Schule sind zusammengebracht in diesen grünen Schulhof. Jedes Klassenzimmer hat dabei eine direkte Verbindung zum Außenraum. Das letzte Gebäude des Ensembles am Ufer ist noch im Bau. Man sieht gut die Komposition aus horizontal und vertikal. Das Haus am See und das vertikale alte Haupthaus. Eine Komposition, die es fast schon seit dem 18. Jahrhundert gibt Uns war das wichtig, wie in den alten Bildern die Hierarchie zu behalten, dass das Haupthaus bleibt und die neuen Bauten sich unterordnen. Ein weiterer Grund für die Aufteilung in Pavillons. Die Gebäude sind alle ähnlich aufgebaut. Eine Holzskelettkonstruktion mit gleichmäßigen durchgehenden Stützenraster dient als Tragwerk. Eine Enfilade erschließt die Klassenzimmer und fungiert als Filter zum Schulhof. Sieht man hier die Enfilade. Haupträume sind mittig unter dem Satteldach. Die Garderoben- und Erschließungsschicht wird wie ein Rucksack angehängt. Ein Bild von der Baustelle. Über die angesprochene Enfilade sieht man durch das gesamte Gebäude hindurch in dem Außenraum. Das Dach spürt man auch im Innenraum. Es läuft von innen nach außen, verbindet das Schulhof und die Schulräume. Außen schafft es geschützte Zonen um Gebäude herum. Der Sockel ist genauso wichtig wie das Dach. Er überwindet nicht nur das Terraingefälle, sondern wird auch als Sitzgelegenheit. Die Schattenfuge zum Boden lässt die Häuser über den Terrain schweben. Gefühlt geht die Landschaft darunter weiter. Dach und Sockel helfen auch mit eingeschnittenen Ecken und kleinen Treppen, die Eingänge in der Häuser zu markieren. Das klare Konstruktionsraster wird zur Regel für vielfältige Ausnahmen. Die Turnhalle als großes Volumen durchdringt die Dachfläche und deutet einen besonderen Raum. Sieht man hier auf die rechte Seite. Davor wird das Vordach erweitert und wird zur gedeckten Veranda. Ein Übergangsraum zwischen innen und außen entsteht. Wie bei einer weiteren Referenz, die uns ganz besonders gefällt, Glenn Marcus House in the Blue Mountains, wo ein bestehender Pfad Teil des Gebäudes wird. Hier sieht man diesen Pfad, und dann kommt man unter ein Vordach und mittendrin im Haus. Nochmals den Pfad. Besonders spannend finden wir in seinem Ansatz der Hightech ohne komplizierte Gebäudetechnik, wie ausladende Dächer, natürliche Beluftung und Becken als Wasserspeicher im Brandfall. So ein Hightech, Low-Tech, die wir ganz spannend finden.
Dann kommen wir zu unserem zweiten Projekt nach Basel. Das ist das Projekt zur Erweiterung für den Kindergarten am Langen Längeweg in Riehen. Auch bei diesem Projekt wird der Bestand, die Ausgangslage, der bestehende Kindergarten von Rassa und Wadi soll erweitert werden um je einen Gruppenraum und eine dritte Einheit soll auf dem Areal Platz finden. Rassa und Wadi kennt man wahrscheinlich vom Domushaus. Der Kindergarten hier in Riehen war eins von ihren ersten Projekten. Das bestehende Gebäude selbst funktioniert dabei schon eigentlich wie ein Ensemble. Es setzt sich zusammen aus unterschiedlichen geometrischen Grundformen. 2 pentagonale Zeltdächer mit den Haupträumen und inzwischen baut die Nebenräume mit dem Flachdach als ein Hexagon. Um Raum für das zusätzliche Programm zu schaffen, skalieren wir dieses Hexagon zu diesem untergeordneten Bau. So entsteht eine neue Raumschicht im Süden. Man sieht es hier, da sind neu die Garderoben drin. Die Haupträume bleiben bestehen, wie sie heute sind, werden nur pinselsaniert. Und im Zwischenraum gibt es größere Eingriffe, der wird neu organisiert mit den WCs und dem Gruppenraum nach Norden und die Eingänge nach Süden verlegt. So kann der Doppelkindergarten weiter als Doppelkindergarten funktionieren, wie er ursprünglich geplant war. Neben den 2 Einheiten soll auch eine dritte Einheit Platz finden. Wir nehmen dafür wieder den Bestand als Ausgangspunkt und wie der Bestand selbst sich, so wie gezeigt, aus diesen geometrischen Grundformen zusammensetzt, wird das Ensemble mit einfachen architektonischen Grundformen erweitert. Es gibt einen Neubau mit einem Satteldach hier hinten und einen kleinen Schopf mit Außengeräteraum mit Pultdach. So entsteht eine einfache städtebauliche Setzung wie kleine Spielzeuge im Garten. So als Referenz haben wir so diese Bauklötze von Fröbel, der Erfinder des Kindergartens war. Die neue Setzung gliedert diesen Außenraum in unterschiedliche Bereiche. Es gibt diesen Garten, der durch den Neubau getrennt wird von dem Schulhof der Primarschule, der hier daneben ist, und hier im Norden an der Straße zwischen den zwei Bauten einen kleinen Vorplatz. Der wilde Garten am Bahndamm entlang, was wir so eine ganz schöne Entdeckung vor Ort fanden, wird durch die neuen Bauten wie gerahmt und ins Areal mit einbezogen. Hier sieht man das, wie diese Grünzone, die sich durch ganz Rien streckt, Teil vom Kindergarten wird. Der kleine Vorplatz dient als Auftakt ins Areal und wird definiert durch die Stirnfassade von dem neuen Bau. Dann kommen wir ins Haus selbst. Ein gemauertes U bildet diesen Rücken zur Schule, eine große Fensterfront öffnet den Innenraum zum Außenraum. Wie im Bestand ist der Zugang zum Kindergarten über den Garten. Garderobe, Hauptraum und Gruppenraum werden über ein Enfilat entlang der Fassade erschlossen. Die gemauerte massive Wand aus Lehmsteinen, die außenliegenden Sparren und die Stützen an der Fensterfront bilden ein Exoskelett. So wird eigentlich dieses Tragwerk gleichzeitig auch Fassade. Und wie im Bestand mit den Zeltdächern gibt die äußere Form auch hier im Neubau den inneren Raum vor. Auf der Mauer aus Lehmsteinen gibt es ein Dach mit Photovoltaikmodulen, Wetterstation und Fühler steuern im Haus eine direkte Lüftung über Fensteröffnungen mit einem Kamineffekt über die Gaube, sieht man hier. So entsteht für uns so ein spannender Kontrast zwischen Low-Tech und High-Tech. So die kleinen Bauten bilden mit den eigenen Charakteren, beziehen sich wie aufeinander, aber sind auch unterschiedliche, so für sich spannende Identitäten. Und sie bilden einen kleinen Mikrokosmos. Dann kommen wir zu unserem dritten Projekt. Beim dritten Projekt geht es auch wieder um kleine Bauten, so ein Thema, das sich bei uns durchzieht. Die bilden aber keinen Mikrokosmos, sondern haben eine Wirkung im größeren urbanen Maßstab. Das letzte Projekt, das wir euch zeigen wollen, ist die Wiederinstandsetzung der Funicolare degli Ancioli in Lugano und die Aufwertung des Parco Tassino. Die Standseilbahn, man sieht die hier auf dieser alten Postkarte, kommt aus der Zeit der Belle Époque, als der Tourismus in Lugano immer wichtiger wurde, weil der Gotthardtunnel zu der Zeit auch eröffnet worden ist. Die Standseilbahn hat die ganzen neuen Grand Hotels, die man hier auch sieht, vom Seeufer aus erschlossen. Und damals waren diese Standseilbahnlifte, die Eisenbahn und die Dampfschiffe noch ganz neu und aufregend. Nicht nur Transportmittel, sondern auch wie selber schon Ziel von den touristischen Erlebnissen. Heute soll diese Funicolare wieder, also die stillgelegt worden ist, dass die Hotels nach und nach geschlossen haben, wieder instand gesetzt werden, aber nicht mehr die Hotels erschließen, sondern es soll ein neues Ziel geben, nämlich weiter nach oben zum Parco Tassino und schließlich wieder zurück, also weiter zum Bahnhof. Die obere Stadt soll dabei mit der unteren Stadt, die heute durch die Gleise abgeschnitten ist, wieder verbunden werden. So entsteht für uns ein hypothetischer Spaziergang durch die Stadt. Man startet unten am Ufer mit einem Restaurant an der Bootsanlegerstation. Den Teil vom Wettbewerb haben wir leider nicht gewonnen. Das war wie verschiedene Teile. Über die Seilbahn hoch zum Ankunftsturm. Dann, um weiter Höhe zu gewinnen, wird der Ankunftsturm aufgestockt und innen geht es mit einer pyrenesischen Treppe, man sieht es, diese Schnecke, weiter nach oben. Am Weg nach oben gibt es schon diese Ausblicke aufs Panorama, wieder so dieses Thema, der Weg ist das Ziel. Schließlich über eine Passerelle, über die Gleise bis zum Parco Tassino. Der Parco Tassino war früher der Garten einer privaten Villa. Kleine Folies, die es da in diesem Garten gab, gibt es heute noch, wie der kleine Enderlin-Turm. Von der Villa findet man aber nur noch eine Bodenplatte ohne Funktion. Diese dient uns als Grundlage für eine neue Folie, die wir in den Park setzen wollen und den Weg zum naheliegenden Bahnhof weist. Hier auf dem Bild sieht man schon die Gleise, die zum Bahnhof führen. Die Folie ist als Gewächshaus gedacht, eine charakteristische Typologie des 19. Jahrhunderts, als damals neue Arten aus fernen Ländern nach Europa kamen mit diesen neu aufkommenden großen Reisen mit Eisenbahn und Dampfschiffen. Das Tessino-Gewächshaus ist aber nicht nur ein Gewächshaus wie im 19. Jahrhundert mit exotischen Pflanzen, sondern ein Ort für die Erhaltung seltener Arten oder solche, die aufgrund des Klimawandels in Zukunft für die Region wichtig werden könnten. Hier gibt es auch eine kleine Buvette und ein Café. Sowie kleine Folies in einem Garten führen uns diese kleinen punktuellen Bauten auf einen neuen Weg oder Spaziergang durch die Stadt. Der Kreis vom Bahnhof zum LAC, dem Museum in Lugano, wird durch die neue Verbindung ergänzt und geschlossen. Hier sieht man das, hier gibt es den Bahnhof in Lugano, dann kommt man über eine Funikulare runter ins Zentrum der Stadt, durch die Fußgängermeile zum Ufer, hier beim LAC, das Museum für zeitgenössische Kunst, und dann über unsere neuen Eingriffe geht es hoch über die Zahnradbahn, über die Standseilbahn, über die Gleise mit der Brücke zum Parco Tassino, mit dem Gewächshaus, zurück zum Bahnhof.
Und als Schlusswort eine Referenz, die wir ganz toll finden. Die Interventionen von Pletschnik entlang der Ljubljanica, die gedacht sind, den Flussraum der Stadt aufzuwerten. Staudamm sieht man hier oben ein bisschen, um die Breite des Flusses im Stadtraum zu kontrollieren und stärken, und punktuelle Bauten wie ein Markt am Ufer und Brücken. Statt einem monumentalen Städtebau geplant ist eine Perlenkette von Interventionen, die wie Folies der Spaziergang durch die Stadt begleiten. Wie Lucius und Linde Burkhardt gesagt haben, ein dynamischer Städtebau entsteht. Inspiriert von Ljubljana versuchen wir im Projekt in Lugano durch kleine städtebauliche Akupunkturen und bis heute unvorstellbare Spaziergänge eine neue Wahrnehmung der Stadt zu ermöglichen. Danke.
Ja, vielen Dank für dieses reiche 3-Gänge-Menü. Das ist jetzt der Moment, wo man den Digestif bestellt, oder? Um die Verdauungsaktivität anzuregen und diese vielen Nährstoffe da gut verarbeiten zu können. Ist es okay, wenn wir das auf Deutsch beginnen? Wir enden vielleicht auf Englisch, oder? Aber wir probieren es mal so. Ja? Und jeder redet so, wie er gerne mag. Sprachlich meine ich. Es ist eine sehr interessante Zusammenstellung von Büros, die uns, also das ist jetzt kein Eigenlob, ich finde einfach interessante Büros, die zusammenkommen in dieser Konstellation, weil ihr alle eigentlich Schweizer Architektur neu definiert. Ich würde als erstes gerne mal wissen, wenn ihr im Ausland vortragt und ihr als Schweizer Architekten und Architektinnen adressiert werdet, findet ihr euch da richtig aufgehoben? Oder ist das zu eng? Hot potato. Mm-hmm.
If we feel comfortable,
if you're addressed as being Swiss architects, if you're, let's say, you give a lecture in the US and you say, yeah, our practice is in Basel, and they said, yeah, okay, so you're the future of Swiss architecture.
No, I mean, yes. I mean,
okay.
I have, yes. I like we have worked mainly. So first, I also studied in Mendrisio. So like part of my formation, it's like Swiss.
Yeah.
I have worked mainly for Swiss practices,
Mm-hmm.
and I taught also in Switzerland mainly.
Yeah.
So.
But you also have an office in Spain, right? Kind of.
We have small projects in Spain, but like we teach, we live, we mainly build here. So our main projects and then there is like a reason why we are here also, because like our main influences are Swiss architecture. So that's why also we are here, because we love Swiss historically Swiss architecture. A little bit like the beginning of the presentation was like this connection of this Catalan magazine that established in the late 80s this bridge between Spain and Switzerland, and how this magazine also, like, I don't know, like Soto de Moura got to know about Herzog and de Meuron through this magazine, or like Jonathan Sergison got to know about Roger Diener through this magazine, no? So, yeah, like we are somehow like really connected with Switzerland, and I think like next year we become Swiss or something.
But we can obtain the passport, yeah. No, we feel a bit like, it's true, when we are in Spain, we are Swiss. When we are here, we are Spanish. When we are in Mexico, we are, I don't know from where. So it's a bit like that, yeah, we don't really know, but it's what Pablo said, like we always work for Swiss offices, like our main references are Swiss architecture. So yeah, kind of we feel very comfortable here, but of course we are Spanish, and that also it's some of our DNA.
Anna Sofia and Arthur, like to hear what do you think?
Maybe we can answer that question after we have the first building built.
Why is that important?
Yeah, maybe it doesn't come like we are expecting as well. Very often, or maybe it will surprise us. No, I don't know. It's rather difficult question, but yeah, I would probably still say that it's more Swiss, definitely, because we are here for 10 years. And we learn from here. We worked mainly here. Okay, maybe you a bit more all over, but yeah, I would at least I would say that they are Swiss based.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, so I will shift a little bit the question, and because I relate also to what the predecessors said.
Closer.
But what is also special is, I mean, Switzerland offers us a possibility in a way that, for instance, coming from France was not possible. This possibility of applying on open competition is something which is rare and which is valuable, and that which have also problems, but allow us to speak or to have a voice tonight. And I think in that sense, we can also consider being a little bit Swiss.
Super. Magdalena and Srdjan, you cannot escape. Okay.
Well, I think we also relate to what our colleagues here are saying.
Yeah.
I think maybe even also, I studied in Munich, but already in Munich we had a lot of Swiss architects as professors. So I think it's really this expansion of Swiss architecture also in different cities, also through professors that come to teach and so on. So you also get it from the start somehow.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I think it is what it is. It's, I think, like Swiss architecture done by people that are informed through a life experience that comes from having a different background. So I think it's I think as simple as that at the end.
Yeah. Okay. So you go about more pragmatically in terms of, like, let's say, a contemporary biography.
Yeah, I think exactly. It has very much to do with biography, what the images that we saw when we grow up, and of course then everything that we learned in Switzerland. And like I also studied in Switzerland, and I'm living here since a lot of years, but then like maybe the different thing from a normal student of the ETH is what are the images that I had when I grew up, but I would really put it on an autobiographic level.
Okay, super, cool. Shadi, did you want to say something?
I just wanted to mention that these guys and girls are all friends as well. Just they all know each other. It's also another kind of an interesting, bond, or also has an influence. Mm-hmm. And I mean, the big question is, we don't have to all answer it now, is what is Swiss architecture? No? And like what you mentioned, maybe this is sort of the next kind of diverse architecture, no, in Switzerland.
Yeah. I mean, I asked the question whether you consider yourself Swiss because I think you are actually rewriting the identity of Swiss architecture in the moment, among with other people from your generation. And I also wanted to know how you feel about this type of operation, because Swiss architecture was very, let's say, centered around a certain culture of authorship in the heroic times of, let's say, the 80s and 90s. And authorship was a term here, or a concept here, that today was rather viewed with a certain critical distance, or you said it's not the most important thing for us. So, for instance, I think maybe the most strongest in Parabase, a presentation where you really basically said, well, if you decide or choose to work with a lot of reused building parts, things that, existing resources, and you take that as a point of departure, then it is almost, it's maybe irrelevant even whether this constitutes an authorship, a signature in the classical sense. And maybe it is also not even possible because the material itself becomes the replacement of authorship somehow, because it creates its own language. And I wanted to know from you, also from the others, but starting with you, because it was most explicit in your presentation, is authorship in the classical sense where an architect tries to develop a signature that makes it possible to identify him or herself, like we know it from the grand old days of icon architecture, something that makes you uncomfortable, or is it simply something that you couldn't care less because you have other issues about that you really deal with?
Yeah, we really don't care. We have like more pressure issues. But of course, like at a theoretical level, yes, we care, and we position ourselves within a bit like this lineage that you have and that you have mentioned. And I don't know, maybe it also has to do with especially working. We trust more like these processes, or like this idea of the reuse. Also, like it's obvious that when you are using things that are kind of embodied or like created by someone else, it's obvious that this notion, at least, it blurs a bit. So,
yeah. Are you worried that this kind of, let's say, the invisibility of the author gesture becomes a competitive disadvantage in terms of recognizing and actually identifying your work?
No, I think it is like, so it's just like a contemporary condition that it happens in architecture, but it happens in any other discipline. Like, for instance, I don't know, in music, like songs, the authors of songs have exponentially grown, because like now every song, I don't know, in Rosalia song, it's authored by 10 people. Because like it's a constant reuse of like samples and beats and appropriation of different things, no? And it's like the same in architecture a little bit also. Well, I mean, and if you add the artificial intelligence in the equation, even more, no? But then, I mean, of course, like there is like, and the other thing, it's like the legislative boundaries for all of this and how we can protect ourselves, no? And that authorship, what for us it's relevant, it's when it comes to not in this frame, but in the frame of contract negotiation with a client. Then authorship is important because it means money and it means responsibility. But in a theoretical, we don't care.
Okay, so more in a legal sense. It's
in a legal sense, of course, it has like it has a consequence in terms of money.
Sure.
And so that's what we care, that we protect authorship in office, and here not.
Any of you would like to add on this, or should we switch, go something else?
I already have the microphone.
Just say something.
Okay, something. Yeah, well, like we also like dealt, especially in the times of the collective, with the question of authorship. So it's going to be a collective. What does it mean to work like in different countries with different backgrounds, how can you avoid or not care about authorship? But somehow what I kind of happen to realize a bit is that authorship is also in a certain way unavoidable. Like in a certain way you notice that their project is done from them, no? So of course I understand the important thing is not to be obsessed maybe by authorship and trying to like find absolutely just formal solutions that somehow brand you, but on the other side I have the feeling authorship happens, like it's very different what we do. Actually maybe the ones that have the most kind of recognizable language are the ones that care the less about authorship.
I'm happy because we're friends. Yeah. I mean, at the same time, Rosaria is the author, no? Even though now exactly the new song has all this mix, you know, from classic music to whatever she does. I think, in a sense, I mean, this also has kind of no answer maybe to it, but there is this sense of, at the end, there is a sense of feeling like, you know, you did something, you produced something, but maybe the way of authorship is now just different. You know, then it's not the one person, it's not the...
Yeah, it's maybe no longer this kind of illusion of creating something unprecedented that has never been done before, but maybe something that is more related to appropriation, to take something and treat it further. And it's interesting that you make the reference to music. I also thought about that, that actually in music you have a specific genre, actually, that is all revolving around this technique of appropriation as a way of making music, which is to cover an original song and turn it into something else. And it's actually interesting that in music, this is actually a very highly respected technique of being original. Whereas I think in architecture, you can easily be kind of down-talked as somebody who has no proper ideas. But if we think of the Beatles, for instance, they said they would prefer any song of theirs performed by a musician of color to their own version. So they said, invariably it gets better. And that's something I wanted to ask all of you, actually, because you all deal in different ways with working stuff that exists, editing it, adding, subtracting, transforming it. And I was reminded as I was listening to you to this one show that we did at the SAM with Countdown 2030, where they made this one statement and said actually that according to studies it would be possible to fit in the entire demand for new building program into existing buildings in Switzerland. So we have enough vacant building structure to absorb whatever programmatic needs we have today, which theoretically, I think it's a theoretical construct, but for the sake of the argument, let's stick to it. We could imagine a contemporary architecture that could do without new construction. Let's say that is true. Let's say this was true. Is this a prospect that would scare you, or would you find it interesting? The possibility of actually only working in the existing, would you find it an impoverishment, a sort of a reduction of freedom of expression in architectural terms, or could you find happiness in that paradigm?
Yeah, with this most recent project, the renovation of this office building, so administration building, I do think that's that example, and I do think that we try to respect it as much as possible. And it was a challenging and interesting thing to do, also because we learn from what was already there, the system and everything that it was already developed there, and also the architect itself and so on. We got to know a little bit about the history. And at the same time, we tried to develop it further. Honestly, for example, the other buildings that we are doing, which are new, we do already put the possibility that someone else is going to touch them. And I don't think that's scary, honestly. I think it's the reality. So for us, that's why we like to do buildings that give the possibility of someone else come there and touch. But hopefully they do the same when they look into what was done and change it in a very sensual way, but also can be artistic. I don't really mind. Do you have?
Yeah, I think it's completely right that every time will be more refurbishments and less new buildings. And I think we never did like a refurbishment, but I think we are only working with these reused pieces, but it's a bit in the same way in the authorship that you were talking before, that we just deal with what it's already there and how, it's another way of somehow doing architecture. But it's not less inspiring or interesting, like there's a lot of potentialities for what is already there, and I think very interesting or special things can come from that. So I think we welcome these.
Actually, with regard to your practice and your presentation, I found it interesting that you kind of kicked postmodernism a little bit in the side, while I think there's a postmodern moment in your work as well. Not in the metaphorical sense of mixing historical styles, but actually in the material sense, right? And I have the feeling working with borrowed building parts that you reuse inevitably conjures collage as a design technique, obviously, right? And that was, of course, a central topic in postmodern discourse, postmodern architecture discourse. Let's remember Collage City by Colin Rowe and Fred Kutter. Who discussed it a bit more in urban design terms, but other people did it in terms of architecture. So I wanted to understand why were you so antagonistic to this type of postmodern legacy? Does it still sting so much?
No, somehow, we don't understand what we do as postmodern. I understand this, what you mean about the collage, but we always try to find like a reason why we are doing this, like to give a meaning to all what we are reusing. So not because we like or not because of the shape or not, because we feel it looks nice. It's more that it has to have a function. It has to be structurally or make sense, like constructively. So we always start from this construction and detail structure, and from there, we end up having the building with this collage or combination of pieces. And we, of course, with reuse, we work with components that are already there, that sometimes they have a strong shape or strong character, that then it's reflected in our building. Mm-hmm. But yeah.
Does it happen that you choose like reused parts because you, not only for the ecological reason that it's cool to reuse them and to save CO2, to do all the good things that we connect to reusing structure, but actually because you just fall in love with them formally?
It's for a lot of reasons. Like also what we talk is about this conception of ready-made. No, it's of course sustainability. It's something very important, and to change from this linear construction system to circular system, it's very relevant. But yeah, we also like to understand these objects, that they have a value by itself, and to compare also what Pablo was saying with music, with other artistic disciplines that take what is already there and combine them in a new piece that can be a song, a movie, or architecture.
Can you explain a little bit that you made two neologisms that I didn't know? They both start with neo. One was neotopia, and the other one was neo-vernacular. I'm interested in both of them.
Neo-vernacular.
Neo-vernacular.
Yeah. These are actually not our words. These are words by...
reused terms, yeah.
Reused, appropriated terms by a good friend, Leopold Banchini, with whom we teach also in Mendrisio, and actually the name of the studio was called Neotopia. So, and neo-vernacular, it is like also connected to it. So we were analyzing basically, let's say, architecture, like contemporary architecture without architects, no? And this was like the neo-vernacular.
Okay, so would you say there is a renaissance of the concept of vernacular architecture? Because we know that it was like pre-postmodern, right, as an architectural history concept by Bernard Rudowski in his fantastic show Architecture Without Architects in 1964. at the MoMA. And it's really interesting because he used it as a very strong critique of heroic modernism, right? And said, you guys, you're all obsessed with your authorship, and you basically, you don't care for architectural knowledge of thousands of years. And he wanted to basically remind them that there existed this tradition. But he did not point out in his show that vernacular architecture could also be a contemporary practice. Now, it seems I also have the feeling there is a contemporary presence of vernacular thinking today, and that's why I was interested in this term of the neo-vernacular that you brought up.
Yeah, like, I mean, reuse basically, it's like the normality in history of architecture, no? It's just after more or less industrial revolution that not reuse, it's like the new normal, no? But this is like high architecture, but in low architecture, in architecture without architects, reuse is everywhere.
Commonplace.
Yeah. And so that's why we are interested in analyzing these types of architecture. At the same time, we feel that it comes really from like this. The result of the architecture, it's a lot of, depending on the availability of the pieces, no? And this economy of means. So it is very much connected, I think, with our way of working, no? Like understanding what is around us physically, but also, I don't know, like looking at the SBB website, which is like another way of like looking at your context and then taking pieces from there, no? So it's a little bit quite of an analogous way of working.
Is this concept of the vernacular, or let's say a new contemporary vernacular, equally important to the two other practices?
Yes, I think to us, I think also maybe you saw it, some of our buildings we also try to, or not we're trying, but it happens that we reference this style of the vernacular.
Would you say there's a style to the vernacular?
Pitched roofs maybe, or
a sign of vernacular, a sign of vernacular?
Yes.
Okay, I misunderstood
A sign.
for style, but you said sign. Okay, get it. Continue.
Yes, and to find this easy solutions maybe to these complex problems, or to find, just direct solutions.
Yeah.
Can I just add one thing? When during the discussions, when you were showing your work also in your atelier, there was this moment where there were so many roof projects, no? Dachprojekte, and it's interesting now that, in a way, it's also being connected as a sign to the vernacular. I think also the projects you showed were quite interesting because of the in-between. So always you kind of seem to do something with the roofs, with the I don't know, with the dach, and then you also have the socle, which you create the in-between. But I just think this reference now to vernacular. Thank you. Is also interesting. Yeah.
Can you throw the microphone back to them? Or would you like in passing?
Yeah, well, maybe in this case it's more like the basic bricks of the language that we have. So we kind of, at the end, investigate the roof more as if it was a word or a form of letter that you use to kind of conceive a feeling or like communicate. So like, of course, because it's ancient, it's understood and we relate to it. So if it's vernacular or not, it's more like a tool, like the basement, the roof, and how can the roof be? Is it just something almost flat, or is it like a very pitched roof that is more like a machine to collect electricity? So like, yeah, we like very much to think about these elements and like use them as a given thing. Yeah.
So it's can you still understand that like maybe 20 years ago, it would have been for most architects a contentious matter of making a saddle roof, and they would have had to legitimize that choice, and because somebody would reproach them of being conservative and backward.
completely ununderstandable, of course. Like the connection between the shape of the roof and a political message, in that time, understandable, maybe in our time, not like to say that flat houses are modern and pitched roof houses are like inspired by the past. I don't know. If you want to see it, you can see it, but I really don't.
Okay.
Hope nobody does. Maybe you.
No, like what I find interesting is that in this new vernacular architecture there is like an international style, and this international style is dictated by the hobby or what you find in your bricolage store close by, basically. And you look at settlements or architecture without architects in Southern Europe and Northern Europe, and the roof it's the same, and the pieces are the same. So there is not like this response to the context. It exists, but it's different. So it is like dictated by our society and our capitalist society and the OB and the Migros market, basically. Or the Bauhaus or the Leroy Merlin, that it's the same in Barcelona than in Basel.
Arthur?
Yeah, I mean, a bit more difficult for me, at least, to relate to the vernacular, maybe in the sense of construction or sometimes in terms of low-tech approach, in terms of architecture aesthetic, we focus so much, or at least the presentation of today, I'm trying to understand what are our time and what we do, or what are the consequences of the event today, that
a bit closer.
It seems a bit far, but that's a reality.
For you, you feel more distance to this topic. Okay. And Sofia, the same?
Yeah, but no, like you said, today we are trying to look at solutions. They are that they emit like they don't emit so much CO2. And actually, when we look back to the vernacular way of building, this is actually where we learn the most. And honestly, as examples that we've been using for some of the projects, we've been doing that quite a lot, and it can be very senseful in a way. The learning from the vernacular, perhaps not so much in trying to bring an expression, because also our buildings are often very much in the center of a city, so it's maybe not the place. But yeah, on a constructive point of view, yeah, like Arthur mentioned.
Vernacular architecture often, basically thrived in a pre-industrial age, right, where technology was not didn't have the status that it had later on. Technology became very important in modern architecture. Actually, it was really an obsession about the machine, of course. That's what, machine habitée de Corbusier starts with this absolute love for everything that's engineered by progress. And for a long time, until high-tech architecture, there was this belief that technology is the means to solve any problem. And there was also the idea, yes, it can do that. If you talk today to like engineers, like Thomas Auer from Transsolar, he recently gave a great lecture at the Architekturmuseum Freiburg, where he basically said, yeah, we as engineers, we flirted with the idea that by using the most advanced technology, we can actually really get rid of any problem. And if we look at the heritage that this thinking produced today, we have to say it's an absolute bankruptcy. It doesn't work. High-tech architecture failed completely. And it was really interesting to hear this from an engineer, and who actually believed in these ideas to some extent. And so he said, actually, there can be no doubt that progressive architecture today needs to start from a low-tech approach. Would you agree?
Could you just repeat?
There's the last words.
Would you? He basically said, this engineer, after criticizing the hubris of, let's say, high-tech architecture, with this kind of message, if you use the most advanced technologies in building construction, then this is the key to solving any problems that we have. For instance, climate, right? And after stating the bankruptcy of that approach, he said there can be no doubt that any progressive architecture today needs to start from a low-tech approach.
Okay. The thing is, yes, we relate a lot to that, definitely. What is a bit more frustrating is that as a young office, it's still not the case. When we try to come with low-tech as a solution today and to promote them, and maybe a little bit in Switzerland, compare also to France or other country, like the high level of technicity that clients require or still want in their building, it's still very implemented, and it's really hard to fight. So of course we propose in one chapter was low tech, I think, in our presentation, but the reality is not completely there.
Mm-hmm.
But I can also give.
But that would not disprove the argument, right?
No, it would not disprove.
It just shows a certain sleaziness or slowness.
The idea that the house technique, mechanische Luftung helps a lot. It is, but like to ventilate that naturally became a problem for some clients. That's things we face daily, even though we try to propose low-tech approach.
Yeah, it's just that I think the comforts are a little bit too high in Switzerland to get to a low-tech approach. People are very used to, I don't know, like you don't hear any, like, for example, for one project, the engineer had to study how would be if the structure doesn't vibrate if like 50 people would be jumping on the upper floor, which will never happen. I don't know how that would be. It's like, it sounds a little bit exaggerated, the comfort, and I think that's where, we have to lower, I think here in this country at least, I don't know how it goes on in the other countries, but we have to lower those comforts in order to go from our low-tech approach.
Pablo?
Yeah, like, I completely agree with what they say, no? Like, yeah, I mean, I can agree to that statement. At the same time, whenever we want to implement it in a project, legislation or regulations makes it impossible, at least in this context. So if you want to do a school like fully, I don't know, like climatized with passive means, you don't get like Minergie, Eco, blah blah blah, and then therefore like you won't do this project or you won't win this competition automatically, no? So I think it's also a lot about conventions, about standards, about regulations, no? Like this also, and what we try to do this at the university, like to question all of these standards, which are actually based, no? Like I think also it's very subjective. So standards are based on measurements taken in office buildings in the States, and the feedback was given by, I don't know, 10 businessmen dressed in a particular way, saying, yeah, I'm comfortable here, or I'm not comfortable here. And this is where all of this is coming from ultimately, no? So it's also, I think, healthy to challenge these things also, but of course, like there is like the legislative thing that it's very difficult to change. But for instance, like it is okay, like to propose a building, making an entire Rückbau of a parking, these columns, 25 meters there, boom, like the railways, I don't know, 30 meters high building, but then when you propose like a greenhouse facade, out. No, so this is a little bit also about like conventions. I think it's way easier to have like a greenhouse than such a structure, no?
Would you say, Carla, in the reuse world, do you have a little bit of chance to not keep to a bit, do a deal about the comforts and about the norms, or is it even
not
bonus
really? Like no, like at the end, reuse is like new building, so you have to follow all the regulations, not even from refurbishment that are a bit more light, but it's like you have to follow everything as it would be new. Of course, maybe you have some graffitis on the wall that I don't know how it will be seen by the people that it comes, but yeah, in terms of comfort and all that, should follow the same.
Do you see a movement? Do you think this will change? I mean, also for normal renovations, but just because you guys are doing these bigger reuse projects.
I think, but in all the sense, like related with this neo-vernacular or like with this comfort and regulations and all this, I think it's true that every time we're going more to low-tech and seeing back to how it was done before all these klima and all these, Luftung or mechanische Luftung, all these things. And so this goes a bit together to changing these regulations and changing the way we experience buildings or we accept buildings, and comfort. Also, the reuse is together with this comfort or like image of what is new, what no, and every time also, and together with this, everyone is looking for that everything has to be very clean, very. So a bit all the globalization is going in, or has been going to this direction for a long time, no? And with reuse, it's a bit going back to giving value to what doesn't have a value, or like to value what it's maybe a bit dirty, or it's not perfect, it's a bit broken.
Can you relate to this kind of, let's say, overpresence of comfort? Do you think we should get more uncomfortable?
I wanted actually to kind of talk about Glenn Murcutt because it was really interesting what you were saying, not that like high tech was a failure, and somehow we can very much relate to that with our passion for Glenn Murcutt. I don't know if this is the right historical interpretation of his role in history of architecture, but like somehow for us the cool thing about that guy is really how he shares this passion for high tech, so like for a light structure, for like a certain way to treat details and everything, but on the other side he's the one that questions the Pompidou, that like does not need a facade made out of pipes and out of machinery, but like makes a house where the ventilation, there is nothing, it's everything that you can open, the ventilation is like just through winds and very simple means, no? And so I could very much relate to that. The comfort case, it's of course, like norms and comfort questions are the biggest issue that we are dealing with now to kind of find the right balance, no? And this kind of brings us very often to these high-tech, low-tech solutions, no? Because in the kindergarten we are doing now in Rien, like there, like the ventilation through windows, so without a mechanical system, is just possible with an extremely precise and complicated system of like, Wetterstationen and Fühler, of like thingies that measure temperature and if it rains, if it does not rain. So maybe to avoid to make big pipes, to make a big monoblock, to make like all this machinery, you then need very tiny little electronical devices that then measure the outside temperature. And then what they do is just to basically open a window at 3 o'clock in the morning, no? And so this we are very much enjoying in this project because it's really this, what we were saying, low tech needs a certain form of high tech very often nowadays, if we want to reach any form of comfort. Mm-hmm. Otherwise it's easy without.
Yeah. Just before opening to the audience, I wanted to know, how do you see the role of the SER in this discussion? In terms of the, let's say, if we talk about comfort, now it doesn't have to be Magdalena, it can be everybody of you, but I think it's obvious that definition of comfort is something that has to do with norms, right? So what somebody thinks as normal, and by that very action makes normative. And the SER is a very powerful organization that is all involved with making norms. And often architects consider this as a kind of a machine that produces these kind of things and creates an output of a framework that can become overwhelming. How is that for you?
Yeah, well, we live in a state of flow, so kind of the norms are also important to find an agreement on what is a standard of quality. Of course, now we live in a situation where norms maybe have to be strongly questioned if we want to reach the goals that we have, but somehow that's maybe also our job to then like find the tools and the ways to question them, no? Because
it's also a job to know that norms are not Baugesetze, not all of them. They're not building rules, but we forget because they're taken so seriously or to the benefit of sometimes the clients that it's also treated this way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you said the client. I think the client is a very important part in this context that comes in, where they, I think, have the possibility to say that they don't want to follow all the normen. Now we had this topic here in the kindergarten, where it was really the city of Rien that was saying, hey, we don't want all the Minagi, we just want a normal window opening and ventilation through that. But it was because of them that we could do that.
Okay. You would expand? Let's finish this topic and then we can...
I wanted to say also coming from France again, the norm here, the ability to bend or to negotiate them, it's amazing for architect. Like, yeah, it allows a lot of things that cannot be happen in other countries.
So you would say these norms and laws are more elastic in Switzerland?
Due to the cultural context, I cannot speak for everyone, but I never seen a country where we can find exception like that and find to innovative solution by bending the norm.
I mean, in Mexico, the regulations are more flexible. Like when we built there, it was a bit more flexible. So in a way, at the end, architecture, as we said, no, it's not an isolated phenomenon. It's something that it is. It has to do with regulations, and it's, for instance, like every innovation that exists in architecture has to be backed with like the proper regulation, no? And it's always the case in every, I don't know, like innovation in society, but and it's always slower, no? But for instance, with reuse, like the problem that has pointed out Carla, no? That it's like considered as Neubau. So all the Brandschutznormen, where the, I don't know, reinforcement bars of like these existing concrete pieces from the 60s apply as Neubau, which I don't know if the right thing, no? Or like how much work you do in early phases, or like the SIA phases make no sense in a reuse building or in a reuse project, or like how you get paid also. You have to somehow like modify these things, and then like not every client follows in any case SIA regulations. Yeah, I mean it's an issue, of course, but yeah.
So there's a question in the back.
Exactly. Maybe we can now open up the. Is that one? Yes. I know some people are really waiting for the apero, but it's nice to hear now from...
Yeah, I wanted just to make a thank you to Andreas, because I remember, I think, one of your first podium discussions 10 years ago, and I was thinking this whole lecture now, that is a real pleasure, at least for me, to see a stage with a 50% parity rate in between men and women, presented in equal conditions and with future generations with parity. And it's really in these 10 years that you spent here. I protested the first time, I remember that. It's great to have this future. Shadi supported me a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I didn't even notice it. It's nice that this is normal. Yeah. Should be normal. Yeah.
Anyone? Other comments, questions?
There must be one more. In any language, almost. Well. Okay.
Really?
Are we sure?
Seriously? Okay. We were kind of boring, I guess. So, well, let's say then, yeah, the discussions will come over the beer, but I would like to thank you a lot for the presentations, which were really interesting and very also interestingly different and compatible. There was like, I had the feeling we can see the contour of a generational thinking that picks up, which makes me optimistic for architecture and the world. And I would love to talk to you all night now, but we have to kind of make the party now. And yeah, but thanks a lot also for your open and straightforward way to situate your practice in the discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.